"You've got to be kidding me," Mark said, squinting at the GPS. "This road's got to be a glitch in the system." "It's not," Laura replied, her voice a mix of excitement and skepticism. "It's on the map, and we're not lost, just off the beaten path." The car's tires crunched over gravel, sending plumes of dust into the air behind them. The setting sun painted the sky a fiery orange, casting long shadows across the deserted road. Laura had suggested this shortcut to shave off some time from their road trip, claiming it was a scenic route her friend swore by. They had been driving for hours, and the novelty of the scenery had worn off. The once vibrant greenery had given way to a monotonous landscape of dry grass and withered trees. The quiet was eerie, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or rustle of leaves. "This isn't scenic," Mark complained, leaning forward to peer through the windshield. "It's just empty." "Patience," Laura said, her eyes scanning the side of the road. "The turnoff is supposed to be right around here." The car rounded a bend, and a dilapidated wooden sign came into view. The paint was peeling, and the letters looked like they had been carved with a dull knife. "Welcome to Whispering Willows," it read, creaking ominously in the gentle evening breeze. "This is it?" Mark questioned, not bothering to hide his doubt. "Looks like it," Laura said, her voice a bit less assured. Summary 1. Mark and Laura, on a road trip, take a shortcut recommended by Laura's friend, which leads them onto a desolate gravel road. The sun sets, and the area becomes eerie with minimal vegetation and wildlife sounds. They find a decrepit sign for Whispering Willows confirming they're on the correct path, despite Mark's skepticism. They drove further down the narrow, winding road, the dense forest of willow trees closing in around them. The car's headlights pierced through the gloom, creating an eerie tunnel of light that danced across the tree trunks. Laura's friend had mentioned a quaint little town, but as the miles ticked away, the only thing that grew was the sense of isolation. "Maybe we should turn back," Mark suggested, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "This doesn't feel right." "We're almost there," Laura said, trying to sound more convinced than she felt. "Let's just keep going." The road grew bumpier, and the trees leaned in closer, their long, spindly branches brushing against the car's side. The quiet was now punctuated by the occasional whisper of the leaves, which seemed to echo through the car's open windows. Laura shivered, not from the cool air, but from the sudden realization that her friend's advice might not have been the best. As the headlights swept across the road, something darted into the ditch, catching Mark's eye. He slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching to a halt. In the beam of light, a shadowy figure stood, staring back at them with eyes that reflected the car's glow. It was a woman, dressed in tattered clothes, her face a mask of dirt and despair. "What the hell?" Mark whispered, his heart racing. The woman took a tentative step toward them, her hand outstretched. Laura rolled down her window, and the woman's voice, hoarse and weak, reached them. "Help, please," she rasped. Her desperation was palpable, but the look in her eyes was something else entirely, something that sent a chill down Laura's spine. Before they could react, the woman lunged at the car, her hands clawing at the window. Laura screamed, and Mark hit the gas, sending the car hurtling down the road as the woman's cries faded into the night. The tension in the car was thick as they drove on, both too stunned to speak. Laura couldn't shake the image of the woman's face from her mind, and Mark's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. They had stumbled upon something unsettling in the heart of Whispering Willows, and they hadn't even reached the town yet. The road grew steeper and the trees thicker. Laura checked the GPS again, but the signal was gone. They were on their own, navigating a path that seemed to be leading them further into the clutches of an unknown horror. The car's engine whined as it climbed the hill, the headlights revealing a clearing up ahead. Laura's eyes widened as she made out the silhouettes of buildings they had found the town. But as they drew closer, the reality of what they saw sent a new wave of fear through her. The buildings were abandoned, their windows shattered, doors hanging off their hinges. The once charming cobblestone streets were now overgrown with weeds, and the only sound was the wind whistling through the ghostly remnants of a place that had once been alive. "Welcome to Whispering Willows," Mark murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think we made a mistake." They drove slowly into the town, the car's headlights casting eerie shadows across the vacant buildings. Laura's gut told her to turn back, but her curiosity and the plight of the woman in the woods compelled her to keep going. They had to find out what had happened here. As they rolled through the deserted streets, a chilling realization dawned on Laura. The whispers they heard in the trees weren't just the rustling of leaves. They were the echoes of a town's final moments, a desperate plea for help that had gone unanswered for far too long. The car's headlights illuminated a single figure standing in the center of the road. It was the woman from the woods, but she had changed. Her eyes were now a fiery red, her clothes fluttering in an unseen wind, and her skin as pale as the moon. Laura's heart skipped a beat as Mark slammed on the brakes again, the car lurching to a stop. "Get out," the woman's voice was no longer a rasp but a commanding growl that resonated through the night. Mark and Laura exchanged terrified glances. They had no intention of complying, but their doors swung open with an otherworldly force, yanking them from the safety of the vehicle. Laura's feet hit the ground, and she stumbled, the cool cobblestone sending a shiver up her spine. The woman's eyes bore into her, and Laura could almost hear the whispers of the willow trees urging her to follow. Mark tried to grab her hand, but she was already being drawn toward the woman, her feet moving of their own accord. The town's buildings loomed over them, the shadows stretching out like claws ready to snatch them up. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of anguished voices that seemed to be coming from every direction. The woman raised a hand, and Laura felt a tug on her soul, as if she were being pulled into a whirlpool of darkness. Mark's grip tightened, and with a strength he didn't know he had, he yanked Laura back towards the car. The woman's eyes flared with rage, and she took a step closer, the ground beneath her crackling with unseen energy. "Don't fight it," she hissed, her voice now a symphony of whispers. "You're already part of us." The whispers grew to a crescendo, and the willow branches snaked out from the forest, wrapping around the car. Laura's breath caught in her throat as she watched the car's metal body bend and distort, the tires popping with a sickening sound. Mark threw the car into reverse, the engine screaming in protest. The branches snapped and retreated, and the woman's eyes narrowed. "You can't escape," she said, her voice now a chilling chorus. The car lurched backwards, knocking down a sign that pointed to a narrow alley. Laura looked back, her eyes wide with terror, as the town's buildings began to shift and twist, the once quaint facades as now grotesque and menacing. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Drive," Laura screamed, her voice cutting through the cacophony. Mark didn't need any more encouragement. He slammed the car into drive and floored the gas pedal, the tires squealing as they shot down the alley. The whispers grew fainter as they left the town behind, but Laura knew they hadn't escaped. The woman's final words echoed in her mind, "You can't escape. You're already part of us." The alley was tight, the branches of the willow trees scraping against the car's paint, leaving trails of bark and leaves in their wake. Laura's eyes darted to the rearview mirror, expecting to see the woman or the twisted town coming after them, but all she saw was darkness. The alley opened up into a clearing, revealing a narrow bridge that spanned a deep ravine. Without hesitating, Mark steered the car onto it, the wooden planks groaning beneath their weight. Laura's stomach lurched as they picked up speed, the chasm below a yawning maw of shadow. As they reached the other side, the whispers grew faint, and the forest thinned out, giving way to a moonlit field. Laura let out a sigh of relief, but it was short-lived. The field was filled with figures, all dressed in the same tattered clothes, their eyes glowing with the same fiery red as the woman's. They began to shuffle towards the car, arms outstretched. "They're everywhere," Laura screamed, her voice hoarse with fear. Mark's eyes darted to the gas gauge, the needle hovering just above empty. The car sputtered, and the engine died. They rolled to a stop, surrounded by the undead townsfolk of Whispering Willows. The figures closed in, their whispers now a deafening roar in Laura's ears. She fumbled for her phone, her trembling fingers unable to unlock the screen. Mark tried the car again, but it was useless. They were trapped. Suddenly, a brilliant light pierced the darkness, blinding Laura for a moment. She squinted and saw headlights approaching from the distance, growing larger as they barreled down the road. A pickup truck skidded to a halt beside them, and the door swung open. "Get in." Now a gruff voice bellowed from the driver's seat. They didn't need to be told twice. Laura and Mark dove into the truck, slamming the doors shut behind them. The driver, an older man with a weathered face and a shotgun in his lap, revved the engine. The truck's headlights cast a blinding light across the field, and the figures paused, their whispers momentarily silenced. The man didn't waste time. He threw the truck into gear and tore off, leaving the whispers of Whispering Willows behind. Laura and Mark clung to each other, their hearts racing as the town's grip slowly loosened. But Laura knew they hadn't truly escaped. The whispers of the willow trees had become a part of her, a haunting echo that would follow her forever. And she feared that the horror of Whispering Willows had only just begun. The truck bounced along the rutted road, the headlights cutting through the darkness like twin knives. Laura's eyes remained glued to the rearview mirror, expecting the figures to reappear, chasing them into the night. But the road remained clear, the only sound the engine's growl and their own ragged breathing. "Who are you?" Mark managed to ask, his voice shaking. The man, who introduced himself as Joe, didn't take his eyes off the road. "Just a passing traveler," he said, his tone gruff. "But I know what you've seen. I've seen it too." Joe went on to explain that Whispering Willows had been cursed for decades. The town had been abandoned after a series of unexplained disappearances and hauntings. Laura's friend had stumbled upon an old legend, one that spoke of a vengeful spirit that lured outsiders to the town, feeding on their fear to sustain itself. They drove in silence for a while, the adrenaline wearing off and leaving them drained. Laura couldn't shake the feeling that the whispers were still with them, riding the currents of the night air. Mark leaned back in his seat, his eyes closed, trying to erase the images burned into his mind. But there was no rest for the weary. As Joe's truck approached the highway, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Laura's head snapped around, her heart in her throat. The figures from the field had somehow made it to the main road, their eyes glowing in the darkness like 100 tiny suns. "We can't outrun them," she murmured, her voice trembling. Joe nodded grimly. "We're going to have to face it," he said, turning the wheel sharply. The truck skidded onto the gravel shoulder and stopped. Laura and Mark exchanged horrified glances as Joe climbed out of the truck, his shotgun at the ready. The figures grew closer, their whispers now a deafening cacophony. Laura's body felt cold, her soul shivering at the thought of being consumed by the malevolent force that had claimed the town. Mark took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "Stay here," Joe instructed, "and keep the engine running, no matter what happens." With a heavy heart, Laura watched him approach the figures, his boots crunching in the gravel. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of pain and anger that seemed to resonate in the very fabric of the night. The air grew colder, and the hairs on the back of Laura's neck stood on end. Joe raised his shotgun, the barrel glinting in the moonlight. The figures didn't flinch, their eyes never leaving Laura and Mark. Laura's grip tightened on the steering wheel, her eyes never leaving the scene unfolding before her. The shot rang out, echoing through the night, and one of the figures stumbled back. But instead of falling, it grew stronger, the whispers feeding it. Laura's chest tightened with fear. They were no match for this ancient power. But Joe wasn't alone. From the darkness of the forest, more figures emerged, these ones different. They were townsfolk, too, but their eyes were clear, their clothes untattered. They formed a line between Joe and the advancing horde, and Laura recognized some of them from the photo she had seen online. The two groups of spirits clashed, the air crackling with unseen energy. The whispers grew to a fever pitch, and Laura's head swam. The truck's engine roared, and she realized Mark had started it without her noticing. "Let's go," he said, his voice firm. But Laura couldn't move. She was rooted to the spot, unable to take her eyes off the battle unfolding before her. The fate of their souls, and perhaps the souls of those trapped in the town, hung in the balance. The clearing was a whirlwind of shadows and light, the clash of good and evil. Laura watched, her eyes wide, as Joe and the town's protectors pushed back the malevolent spirits. The whispers grew weaker, the figures stumbling, their grip on the world of the living slipping. Laura felt a glimmer of hope, a spark in the abyss of fear that had consumed her. But the woman from the woods was not so easily defeated. She loomed over Joe, her eyes burning with a rage that seemed to illuminate the night. Laura's heart pounded as Joe took aim, his hand steady despite the chaos around him. The shot rang out again, and this time the woman recoiled, a screech tearing through the whispers like a dagger through fabric. The protectors surged forward, their combined strength driving back the dark spirits. Laura could see the fear in the woman's eyes, the desperation as she realized her power was waning. With a final, ear-piercing shriek, she vanished into the night, the whispers fading like the last echoes of a dying scream. The protectors turned to Laura and Mark, their faces a mix of relief and warning. They knew the woman would not be gone for long. They had bought them time, but the battle was far from over. Laura nodded, her mind racing. They had to find a way to break the curse, to free the town and themselves from the clutches of this relentless horror. Joe climbed back into the truck, his expression grim. "We're not out of the woods yet," he said, starting the engine, "but we're closer than we were." They drove through the night, the whispers of fading memory. Laura couldn't shake the feeling that the town was watching them, waiting. The road stretched on, a ribbon of asphalt unfurling before them like a promise of safety. But she knew the truth: there was no true escape from the whispers of Whispering Willows. As dawn broke, they saw it in the distance, a beacon of light in the gloom. A gas station, the neon sign flickering to life as if welcoming them back from the dead. Laura's eyes filled with tears as she realized what Joe had done for them. He had sacrificed himself, a lone guardian in a town lost to time. They pulled over, the silence deafening after the cacophony of the night. Laura stepped out of the truck, her legs wobbly. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "For everything." Joe nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "Don't come back here," he said. "Tell everyone you know. The whispers are real, and they'll never stop calling." With that, he vanished into the early morning light, leaving Laura and Mark alone on the side of the road. They climbed back into the car, their hearts heavy with the weight of what they had witnessed. They knew they couldn't outrun the whispers, but maybe, just maybe, they could stop others from hearing them. As they drove away from the gas station, Laura felt a strange sense of peace. The whispers had not disappeared entirely, but they were distant now, a faint echo in the back of her mind. They had survived the night, but the town of Whispering Willows remained, a living testament to the darkness that lurked within its borders. The sun rose, casting a warm glow across the landscape, but it couldn't erase the chill that had settled in Laura's bones. They had glimpsed the horror that lay beneath the surface, and it had changed them forever. Laura vowed to honor Joe's sacrifice and to spread his warning, hoping that others would heed it before it was too late. The story of Whispering Willows would not end with them. It was a tale that would be told around campfires and whispered in the dark, a grim reminder of the price of curiosity and the enduring power of fear. Laura knew that the whispers would always be with her, a haunting melody that played in the quiet moments of her life. But she also knew that she had faced the darkness and lived to tell the tale. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. For now, the open road stretched before them, a symbol of freedom and escape. Laura and Mark drove in silence, the sun slowly burning away the shadows of the night. They had no plan, no destination, just the need to put as much distance as they could between themselves and the cursed town. As the miles ticked by, Laura's thoughts turned to the woman in the woods, the desperation in her eyes. The woman had not been just a spirit, she had been a warning, a plea for help. Laura's heart ached with the realization that she had failed to heed that warning. But she was determined to find a way to save the others, to end the curse that had claimed so many souls. They pulled into the next town, a small, sleepy place that seemed a world away from the horror they had just escaped. Laura stepped out of the car, her legs shaky, and filled the gas tank, her mind racing with thoughts of research and redemption. Mark went into the convenience store, returning with 2 cups of strong, black coffee. They drank in silence, the caffeine a much-needed jolt to their weary systems. "We need to go back," Laura said finally, her voice firm. "We can't just leave them there." Mark looked at her, the doubt clear in his eyes. "Are you sure?" "No," Laura admitted. "But we can't ignore what we've seen." They decided to find a local library, a place where the whispers of the past could guide them to the truth of Whispering Willows. They had a feeling that the town's dark secrets were buried in the pages of forgotten history books and dusty newspaper archives. Laura knew that the whispers would be waiting for them, that the woman would be watching. but she was ready. The library was a sanctuary of sorts, a bastion of knowledge that stood in stark contrast to the shadowy forest they had just left. Laura felt a strange comfort among the rows of books, as if the very act of seeking information was a form of resistance against the fear that had gripped them. They spent hours poring over records, piecing together the town's tragic history. The whispers grew stronger as they read, the words on the pages seeming to shiver with the echoes of the town's lost souls. Laura's eyes scanned the text, her mind racing as she searched for a clue, a weakness in the curse that they could exploit. And then she found it. A story of an ancient burial ground, a place where the town's ancestors had made a pact with a vengeful spirit to protect their land. The pact had been broken, and now the spirit sought revenge, feeding on the fear of the living to maintain its grip on the world. Laura's heart pounded as she shared her findings with Mark. They had a mission now, a way to save themselves and the town. They set out again, armed with a newfound resolve. The whispers grew louder as they approached Whispering Willows, but Laura and Mark ignored them, focusing on the task at hand. They had to find the burial ground, to right the wrongs of the past and set the spirits free. The sun dipped below the horizon as they drove down the familiar road, the willow trees looming over them like sentinels of doom. Laura gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, as they approached the town. The whispers grew to a deafening roar, but she didn't slow down. They had a purpose now, a reason to face the darkness that had consumed the town. And as they drove into the heart of the nightmare, Laura knew that they would not be alone. The spirits of Joe and the protectors would be with them, guiding them through the shadows. The battle was not over, but they had taken the first step toward victory. The whispers of Whispering Willows would not be silenced easily, but Laura and Mark were ready to fight. The town had taken a piece of them, but they would not let it have their souls. The whispers grew louder, the air thick with anticipation. Laura's heart raced as they drove deeper into the town, the buildings leaning in as if to swallow them whole. But she had the words of the ancient pact echoing in her mind, a beacon of hope in the sea of despair. They had to find the burial ground, to face the spirit and break the curse that had taken so much from so many. Laura's eyes scanned the overgrown streets, looking for any sign of the hidden place. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of anger and desperation that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. As they drove deeper into the town, the buildings grew more twisted, their shapes contorted into grotesque forms that seemed to mock the living. Laura's skin crawled, but she pushed on, her resolve unwavering. They had to end this nightmare. Finally they found it, a clearing hidden behind a veil of willow trees. The burial ground was a sea of unmarked graves, the headstones long ago claimed by the forest's embrace. Laura and Mark stepped out of the car, the whispers now a tangible force that pushed against them, trying to keep them away. They approached the center of the graveyard, where a massive willow tree stood, its branches reaching out like the arms of a monster. Laura could feel the malevolence emanating from it, the spirit's power pulsing through the very earth beneath their feet. Mark gripped her hand, a silent promise of support, as they stepped into the clearing. The whispers grew to a crescendo, the air vibrating with energy. Laura's eyes searched the shadows, waiting for the woman to appear. But she didn't come alone. The town's lost souls emerged from the darkness, their eyes a mix of hope and fear. The woman in the tattered dress stood before them, her fiery eyes locked on Laura's. "Why do you disturb us?" she hissed, the whispers swirling around her like a dark aura. "We've come to set things right," Laura said, her voice steady. "To end the curse and free your souls." The woman laughed, a sound that was more a chilling shriek than any expression of mirth. "You think you can undo what has been done?" "We know of the pact," Laura said, her voice echoing through the clearing. "We know how to fix this." The woman's eyes narrowed, the whispers around her growing quieter. "You seek to rob us of our vengeance." "Vengeance won't bring peace," Laura said. "Only forgiveness and redemption can do that." The woman's expression shifted, a flicker of something akin to doubt crossing her face. Laura took a deep breath, reciting the ancient words she had found in the library. The air grew still, the whispers dying down to a murmur. Slowly, the spirits began to gather around the tree, their forms solidifying as the curse weakened. Laura felt a surge of power, a warmth that filled her with strength. Mark stood beside her, his eyes wide as he watched the scene unfold. The woman stepped closer, her hand outstretched. Laura took it, feeling the cold, unyielding grip of death. "You must truly believe," she whispered, her eyes searching Laura's soul. "I do," Laura said, her voice firm. The woman nodded, and together they recited the final incantation. The earth trembled, the tree's branches shaking loose their leaves in a storm of whispers. The spirits began to rise, their cries of anger and despair slowly morphing into sighs of relief. The sky above them split open, a shaft of light piercing the darkness. Laura felt the warmth spread through her, filling her with hope. The woman's grip tightened, and for a moment Laura thought she would be pulled back into the abyss. But then she let go. The spirits surged around them, the light from the sky enveloping them. Laura watched as they began to ascend, their forms becoming less solid, more ethereal. The whispers grew fainter, the darkness retreating. The woman looked at Laura, her eyes no longer burning with anger but filled with a profound sadness. "Thank you," she murmured before she too began to rise. Laura felt a pang of regret, knowing she had robbed the spirits of their vengeance, but also a deep sense of peace that she had released them from their torment. As the last of the spirits disappeared into the light, the town of Whispering Willows began to change. The buildings straightened, the streets cleared of debris. Laura and Mark looked around, their eyes wide with wonder. The town was no longer a nightmare but a ghostly echo of its former self, the malevolence gone. They drove out of the town, the whispers now a faint memory. Laura knew they had not just survived a horror story but had become a part of it, forever changed by the experience. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the landscape as they left the town behind, the whispers of the willow trees now a gentle lullaby rather than a sinister call. The road ahead was long, and Laura knew there would be more battles to fight. But she also knew that she was no longer just a tourist on a road trip. She had faced the darkness and come out the other side, stronger for it. And as they drove into the night, Laura whispered a prayer of thanks to Joe and the protectors, the guardians of a town that had once whispered of fear and despair, now silent except for the rustle of the willow trees that bore witness to their escape. The whispers of Whispering Willows had led them to a new path, one of healing and hope. Their journey had only just begun.